Okay. Hi, everyone. You're at the Enlightened Soil Webinar, and you're here to learn about vermiculture with Dan Rasure from Fed and Happy. So hope you're in the right place. Thanks for joining us. We'll just tell you how the hour will go, and then we'll get into it. So yeah, Dan's going to give us a beautiful presentation for the first 30 to 40 minutes. And the last however long we have, 20, 30 minutes, will be spent as a Q&A. But throughout the presentation, please put your questions, comments in the chat, and we'll get to them as we do. And then when the Q&A starts, please turn off your camera or turn on your camera, turn off your mute, and we can all talk together. But yeah, I'm Yazzie, and I help with the marketing and education with Enlightened Soil, and I'm joined by Camille.
I'm Camille. Hi, everyone. I do education and grower support for Enlightened Soil Core, and we're really lucky to have Dan Rasure with us.
Yeah, there's Dan. You're going to learn a lot about Dan and what he does. We are very grateful at Enlightened Soil to work with Dan and his team at Fed and Happy. They are very committed to helping growers in their community transition to a more biological growing operation with healthy soil and plants. And yeah, we've seen a lot of synergy with the algae and Dan's worms. So we're excited for you to learn a little bit about that and yeah, about these little guys they're working with. So you ready, Dan?
I am. Well, thank you very much, guys. So we are Fed and Happy, and we are about a 10,000 ton red wiggler vermiculture operation. We're based out of Hutchinson, Kansas. We have a few satellite operations as well, but we ship throughout the country and then some into Canada as well. And just like our name, Fed and Happy, we believe in scrumptious meals for our soil and our worms. And that's our foundation block for everything that we do. And with that, we believe that you can't create or destroy energy. And so with everything that we're doing, we're looking at how we capture what we have and then where we can get additional energy to feed both the worms and the biology. Our system is basically designed as a giant Johnson Sioux reactor. Our rows are up to 900 feet long, 60 feet wide, and we've got 4 different bays. And within that, we don't run a normal windrow system. Our rows are about 60 feet wide, and that allows us to go and harvest a little bit differently. And so we're constantly adding and taking away material. And that way, from a fungal perspective, we're able to have a lot more stability within our system and create more strength and also more natural aspect in that. From a in-soil perspective, we've been using in-soil for about 2 years, or I guess probably just a little bit over 2 years now. And honestly, from a financial aspect, using in-soil dramatically hurt us and made what we do with the worms on the surface actually harder. But at the end of the day, we are more about producing biological substrates than we are just producing worms. And so what happened is that once we started using the algae, our system started changing how it breathed. And when it did that, we got even more microbial activity that we had going on before, driving more oxygen down deeper into the system. And with that, our worms spent more time at deeper levels within our system, and it became harder to go and attract them to the surface. But at the end of the day, we are substrate producers first and worm producers second. And so even though it made it harder for us to harvest our worms, it did significantly improve our substrate quality. So within that, we believe in that flywheel and continually feeding that flywheel system and getting it going both as stable and as fast and as diverse as we possibly can. Then we also on top of the worms, we also produce extracts. And it is more than just producing extract that's going through our screen castings. We start with our rainwater, then we go into a 300,000 gallon fish tank. And then from there, the water goes into a floating worm bed. From there, it goes into more of a fungal pit. And then from there, it goes into bacterial. And then we also have a series of nematode holding areas as well that have different insects in them too, in order to constantly be promoting that nematode production. All that material cycles, and then it goes two different directions. That liquid is used to water our worms, add that biology back into our system on a continual basis, but then it also will go into our extract process to produce our extracts that go out for foliar seed treatments and in furrow applications. And while the bulk of our numbers happen within 4 or 5 states of Kansas, we do ship that nationwide as well, starting in 1 gallon containers and going up to semi loads. Next. So within that, our solutions, they range anywhere from the vegetables to turf to cotton to wheat, soybean, corn, beans, etc. Next. I got started in this kind of having a bad day and was thinking about soil and thinking about how I learned about soil when I was a kid. Like, I learned about soil via worms. And so bought some worms, couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew I had access to a 300,000 square foot building, plenty of land, plenty of manure, and said, we're going to be the biggest and best worm casting provider that we can be. And really at that original juncture, didn't put any thought into selling worms and or the liquids because of how some timing worked out within the market. Word of mouth, kind of a fluke deal. We started selling worms. Our husbandry is built off of a really organic regenerative practices. And that really came from a little bit accident. The fact that noticed that some of the worms that we had bought from different suppliers, the ones that were using a cornmeal or different waste products, that they just were a little bit sluggish, and it took them a while to get acclimated into our system. And we had worms from a producer that just used some leaf mold, and even though their worms were small, they started reproducing within hours to a few days of being in our system, and then very quickly they were at the size that we wanted. And so our husbandry practice all originated from that, and we don't use any GMO inputs within our system. We do use manures, so obviously there can be some within there, but our main substrates are all GMO free. And a big part of that is we're trying to reduce glyphosates and other items in there. And we've definitely tested soy meals and DDGs, et cetera. And what we found is that oftentimes it killed the biology, and then in turn killed the worms too. And so that just became our standard practice. And we love producing scrumptious meals for our worms. It's not where it used to be. It used to be that our worms got baked pumpkins and truly a scrumptious meal for them every week as part of our breeding operations. As we've grown, some of that has gone by the wayside, but we're still very focused on how we're feeding that biology and creating a very scrumptious meal, and one that's diverse in order to go and continue to feed the diversity in biology that we want. So whether it's this or worms or producing crops, I believe I'm very, very strong advocate in loving your foundation, loving what moves your moves your needle. And this morning I woke up about 3 a.m. excited for this, and we're setting up a new operation. So I knew I had some worms to feed and did that. And, it's always a good reminder when you're down in the trenches and doing some of those basic tasks and really seeing what's moving your needle as well. So, touched a tiny bit on this. Our system, very large Johnson Sioux. The picture that you're seeing here is actually our staging area, and we cover crop our entire system. And this area, after it sits in the staging system, and for anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, we hold up to about 1,000 tons in this area. But we cover crop it. We'll make slight adjustments based on where those castings are going to get used or how they're going to get used. And we also alter our cover crops depending on the age of those castings within the system as well. So that's why you see the green, and that's what also allows us to have the mycorrhizae fungal counts that we do. And typically we're about 4% by mass. And then also large spore count, the fact that we are very big about having that living root, which is also helping us drive more and more oxygen down in that system as well. On our humate side, we have both our humates and fulvates that are coming from the worms, but also we start incorporating biochar into our system right from day one with our manures. And so over that 24-month period, that biochar is in the system, it's breathing, it's getting inoculated with what we want it to get inoculated with. And it's pretty cool to see how that changes both our nutrient mobilization and an overall biological life within our systems too. We have a large screener that we use that we produce a super fine product, about a 16th inch screen. That product gets used from anywhere from some mixing with seed, a lot in our more retail lawn and garden, as well as some broadcast and then turf. Then our 1/8 inch products, we've got 4 different 1/8 inch products, and depending on how we screen them or adding additional products, and that varies anywhere from our seed drill product to mix with seed, or in some cases, in some producers, different fertilizers or other mixing substrates to. Then we also have 2 different 1/8 inch mixes that we use for extracting, and one that primarily gets used for broadcast as well. And then we have 2 different 1/4 inch mixes. One of them is primarily used underneath sod or in rehab areas, that between that little bit of more aggregation to it and the biochar, when it gets underneath sod, it truly acts as a substrate and fertilizer that just keeps giving and giving and giving, and really helps that breathability of that sod, as well as driving down those roots much faster than what you typically see in a normal system. That also gets used a lot on different producers if they want to till that in, or if they're looking to rehab some pasture, it'll get mixed in there as well. And then it does also get used as a starter for other systems, whether that be somebody building a Johnson Sioux or somebody building their own vermiculture system. Is that with our fungals, it has a decent amount of worm cocoons in there as well. It's a great starter package. Then within that, our next process is our liquids. And on those liquids, we're producing both seed treat products as well as in-furrow and foliar products. And we screen those mixes anywhere from a 20 mesh all the way up to an 80 mesh, depending on what the customer wants. And then we're also going for different densities as well, depending on what those goals are as well. And regardless of where we're at in the process, we are constantly adding algae to our products. One, we believe that it really mobilizes the rest of what we're doing within the microbiology. Also, it adds that additional breathability aspect, and that our breathability and driving breathability within the soil is already high. But when we add the in-soil, it really kicks us to a completely different level as well. The other aspect within the in-soil and the fact that it can continue to grow in the dark really gives us an advantage as well. So next. So unfortunately, life did give us a little bit of lemons. Even though our facility is 300,000 square feet, one of our unused shipping docks, we had storm damage on June 18th. And it's created a lot of issues for us within the city and what we're doing. So we're in the process of getting this done, but you know, most people don't understand a worm operation, especially the one the size of ours. And so it's definitely created some operational challenges for us as well as we navigate through this. We've moved our screening operations. We've had to change some of our access into our overall building, moved our liquid loadout. And so, but it's also created definitely a lemonade situation too. And that while we've always been evaluating additional production points, both for our castings and our liquids, and looking for options to get operations even closer to our customer pockets. And so that is something that we're doing. And so if there's anybody on the call that would like to see us look at a potential operation, either a partnership or us bringing our products and systems directly to you, that's something that we're looking at throughout the country and Canada as well. And, you know, the scale is really variable based on what that local market really needs. So additionally for everybody here, we're running some specials right now too on if you buy 5 tons of castings, you're going to get the 6th one free. You're also going to get some algae or 6 bags of our 40-pound bags of castings that we can ship via UPS. Get the 6th one free. Same thing on our seed treatments, our extract. Your 6th tote is free. And additionally on our 5-gallon buckets of seed treatments. And then the other aspect on that too, we do have semi-specials that we're running as well. And so, and with 10,000 tons of process and everything in our system is basically a 24-month process. And so if you're getting castings from us, they've been in our system, getting fed, getting built, adding metabolites, adding enzymes for at least 24 months. And then going through that staging process where we're adding more fungal to it as well. And so you are truly getting a product that it's not a peat moss product that's gone through there for 6 weeks. It is a full spectrum product. So on that, you know, if we like to say, you know, if there's a growing application or if there's something that grows, we have an application for it. I mean, you're not going to see something where an extract or a worm casting is not going to have a benefit. It may not necessarily be the benefit that you fully expect. And I think this year we've definitely seen a lot of stress reducers. And typically what we see with worm castings and extracts is how it improves and how it speeds up processes within the plant. Last 12 months and really seeing all the stress that we've seen, whether it was in the fall, winter, spring, or yet the summer, we've seen different application rates really slow down the plant and allow it to operate and be much more efficient until the conditions were right as well. And I think that's been really cool to see, and also see those threshold points of where you have to be at in biological life. And so it's not just about putting a little bit of biology out there. You definitely have to hit that tipping point in order to get that quorum sensing as well. And so again, that comes back to, it's not just about the biology, it's how we're feeding that biology. And so on that solution, you know, a lot of our foliar applications right now, they're as much about the next crop as they are about finishing this crop out as well. And then the importance of, you know, biology is going to react differently throughout the season, and how, where that plant's growing, where the soil's at, temperature, etc. And just knowing that none of this is a silver bullet. It is definitely a system, and staying steady. And like, so, you know, the best time to apply biology was yesterday. So today will usually just work just fine, but there's some time that has to go into it as well. But we also can't get caught up on always being perfect either, because we have to get started. So I think for us, you know, cotton this year, it's been a growth area for us. Still looking for that data on how it comes back, but you know, it's pretty phenomenal how many applications cotton get throughout the season. And if we can get ahead of some things early in the season, how much that changes that cotton throughout the year. You know, wheat, getting ready for drilling season. I'm a huge advocate of both granular and liquids on wheat in the fall. We can really knock back that stripe rust potential with fall application. We definitely have some options in the spring as well, but we really get things going right in the fall, we make things so much better for the spring. On our grazing side, again, weevils, with the nematodes that we have built into it, if you can get that fall application, you can really knock back that potential for weevils in the spring. Again, we can kill them in the spring, but anything that we can do on that preventative side in the fall really helps us get a much stronger start in the spring as well. And you know, we use some different application rates within the in-soil, all the way to full recommended rates from in-soil to significantly less too. And part of that's, you know, building that in with our liquids, building in with the castings, and then looking at what else the farmer is doing too. And overall, we really see significantly higher nodules, nitrogen fixation, but then also just that photovoltaic efficiency of the plant. And that was our very first thing that we saw within the algae when we started using it. It was January, and our building, when it doesn't have a hole in our south roof, is pretty controlled from a light perspective. And then within that, we see within those cover crops, we know pretty much where we're going to be at on cover crop growth, when we need to reseed, et cetera. And we're not getting a full season on our cover crops by any means. But as soon as we started using the algae, it almost doubled the life of our cover crops, even in cold weather. So really taking advantage of that photovoltaic, and then just increasing that efficiency, driving more exudates into the soil. And so that was a cool thing that we saw within a more controlled environment, but definitely one that we see. And it doesn't matter if it's a turf or a vegetable, wheat, even on stripe damaged wheat this year, and stuff that got applied, honestly, probably too late. It was pretty interesting to see how that wheat just took advantage of the light it did have, even though it had been damaged. So next. Beans on our nodulation, it's not uncommon at all, treated or untreated, just to see anywhere from double to quadruple the number of nodules on plants that have been treated from an in-furrow aspect. Also, the beans themselves, whether it be an edible or a soybean, significantly less cracking, a stronger seed, higher pod counts. Right now we have a lot going out on podworm reduction, the nematode within there eats that larva and prevents them from hatching. So go ahead. Right now, this time of the season, we're working a lot towards looking at nematode populations, some fungal pressure, but then also stepping up for that next season too, and finishing out the crop. And typically we do in furrow on the corn and then 2 applications throughout the season. Sorghum, we're usually in furrow at a rate of about 5 gallons an acre. And then typically late summer coming back again on a foliar application, bumping up those sugar levels, eliminating or significantly reducing any headworms, and then helping power through that last bit of the summer with that stress and getting us through that filling stage. Next. On the grazers, we've got anything from unirrigated grazers that if a pivot is on or irrigation's on, they're running some sort of extract, or whether that's a liquid that they're buying from us, one that they're making just with a granular mix, significantly faster rebounding, greater tonnage, but really improving that palatability and that feed value, and then overall reducing that insecticide need. The biggest one being weevils. Now, I will say with biologicals, weevils can be tough, and this season was a lot of our growing areas. We had maybe 80-degree weather today, and up to snowing tomorrow, the next day. And from getting those biological counts up where we want them to be, that makes it tough from a kill perspective. And in the spring, we're looking at 2 applications, but I'd say that this is one of our toughest springs that we had regarding weevils. So next. We talked a little bit about it early on, that drought tolerance, better utilization of that moisture, the nitrogen, stripe rust prevention. Then the other side too is that weed suppression. With our fungal counts in there, we're using pigweed as a food, and if we can get that fall application on it, we're going to see much less weed pressure both in the spring, but then also carrying forward too. Next. Just some of the roots that we typically see. We're still waiting on some additional counts coming back, but our carbon sequestration is definitely higher with the in-soil. High without it, but adding the in-soil significantly improves that ability to go and put more carbon in the soil. From a testing perspective, we love the Haney test. Also like trace genetics as far as DNA tests, but really looking at those DNA tests and making sure that they are representative of what's really going on, especially how we're unlocking the phos. It's not unlikely for us to see phos rates that hit saturation levels. And so the biology has definitely done its job, but really understanding those tests, looking at where we're at on calcium. Most of our producers completely drop commercial phosphorus within our auction. Looking at that breathability. If we've got good breathability and we're opening up that soil, moving nutrients is either already happening or quickly thereafter it. So opening up our compaction. We've seen compaction drop even with just simple in-furrow applications. But again, there's a lot of variables going on, and so it's not a silver bullet, and really understanding and paying attention to your system is always important. And so within that, we're not our producers, even though we have a significant number of organic growers and organic certified growers, we're working with a commercial fertilizers all the time, and herbicides, et cetera. So it's not a all one package or another. It's all working together too. Again, our main facility is in Hutchinson, Kansas, but we do have some other warehouses, and we ship throughout the country, some internationally as well. And like to help you guys out.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll leave this up for a minute if anyone wants to write this information down, but it'll be in the follow-up too. And then we can all look at each other and ask Dan some questions. Thanks, Dan. All right, I'm gonna close this out, but again,
So one thing that wasn't on the webinar, but trees. Trees are another great use of the extracts, both extracts and the granular. And just like any other plant, I mean, if you can use it when you're planting, great. If you got an established tree, I like using it both from a probe perspective, spraying the leaves. I mean, if there's a problem with the tree, there's a good chance we can fix a lot of it with an extract. And it's usually a multi-application, but the cost is so competitive that makes a lot of sense. And again, we add in soil again, and I mean the fastest response. I mean, on an aspen tree, I've seen leaves grow within 20 or double within 24 hours post application. So.
awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop this. And take the spotlight off you. All right. Let's see. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and talk to us. But we got one in the chat from John to start. So John asks, how quickly does the extract need to be applied? What is the shelf life of both the extracts and the granular products?
So our granular products, you know, we always say that they should be used within 6 months. But in reality, a lot of our testings come back that if you keep them stored properly, they're not getting too hot, not getting too cold, they've got some moisture to them, they're going to maintain life for a pretty significant period of time. But again, it is a living product. It's consuming food within it, and it should be used. On the extract, you know, I think that's the multifaceted question. You know, an extract as a whole has not been fed. Therefore, therefore it's not going to be going anaerobic. But at the same time, you are taking living items and putting that through there. And so I believe you have greater value if you're utilizing it quickly. But if you're sealing it up and then using it, I mean, we have test subjects that, you know, they've been bottled up for a year and then they get used, and they still have significant value. So as that ages on an extract basis, and this is not a tea basis that's been fed, the value changes with time. You're going to see a drop in your fungal counts. That hyphae is getting consumed within it. But you know, as a whole, you know, we like to see extracts, if they've had a little bit of air to them, used within 2 to 3 weeks. Another thing that's kind of a wild card for us is the fact that, given the fact that we have the in-soil within our extracts, we are producing oxygens within those systems as well, which also gives us more stability.
Awesome. Okay, Evan, I can read your story and question, but if you want to unmute yourself and and tell Dan yourself, you can do that too. If you don't unmute yourself, I'll read it. Okay. So this is from Evan. There was a huge nitrogen tie-up in my sweet corn due to a monoculture rye cover crop, and I didn't want to apply any supplemental synthetic fertilizer. So my sweet corn was very stressed, and I decided to mix vermicompost extract and fish hydrolysate, which I foliar applied. Mind you, my corn was about 3 feet tall. After applying this, it looked pretty good for a few weeks. Then all of a sudden, it shot tassels and didn't produce anything. Would you have any ideas on why this would occur?
I'd look at your potassium levels. The other side I see, also I'd look at if that's a heirloom variety or what type of variety it is. I definitely see that when we drop stress levels in heirloom varieties, sometimes the reproduction rates drop. That would just be kind of some starting points on there. It probably would have been better to apply it more as an in-furrow to start with to open that up as well.
Galen asks, how long does the seed treatment last in dry land farming and no rain for 3 to 6 weeks?
So the seed treat, that's getting inside that seed. So again, I like to be as quick as possible. I think you get more value. But again, the fact that that seed treat has humics and fulvics and other items within there, it's both getting on the seed and in the seed, creating benefits. But again, as time goes by, those benefits are slightly different. And again, sometimes also in the beginning, it's about what we can do. And I stress to people that look at the systems and look at the equipment you have to start with. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in spending a lot of money buying some sort of application system when we don't even know if it's how it's going to work or where we really get our bang for our buck. And so put your money into your product more instead of sometimes all your application system, and see what's working and then build, and keeping it simple, keeping that ROI high.
Yes, keep that ROI up. Francis wants to know if you do on-site microscopic testing.
We do. We can also, we do on-site testing, consulting, both for the customers and then also within our facility. And also understanding that, that can change throughout the day, throughout the year, month, what you have going on from cover crops. So keeping everything in context is really important. But yes, whether that be on site for the grower or in our facilities, we're constantly testing.
Rich Johns wants to know, are the full agronomy reports available? What is the dilution rate for the extract for the foliar spray?
So on our foliar spray, typically it's a full concentrate level. But depending on the crop, we're running anywhere from 4 gallons to at most 10 gallons. And then adding water to that. Typically, now we've seen a significant increase of drone use this year. And so within that, those dilution rates have definitely dropped. And the fact that the drone operators really want to be 2 to 4 gallons an acre. And so whereas a spray application or fertigation application, we may be going 4 gallons of product and then, up to 16 gallons of water through the sprayer.
And then are the full agronomy reports available?
Probably need more questions related to that, but we do have a couple agronomists that work with growers as well. So we have options on that about how that can work within your system too.
Kyle asks, can foliar applications of the extract help with aphid pressure in alfalfa, and when should you apply after cuttings?
Absolutely. Aphids were our first insect that we went after, even though I've actually kind of gotten fond of aphids at times, because I've now found that when aphids are in a balanced system, they actually are helping the plant, just kind of maintaining, doing some trimming. It's when they're out of check, and when those plants are leaking, usually synthetic ends, that we get these aphid outbreaks. And so within that, I'd say, yes, it's going to kill the aphids, but it may not be quite as necessary when you get your biological system really in check and your beneficial insects. But from a kill time, extracts we typically see kills within hours of application.
You're on mute, yes.
Oh. And also, when should you apply after cuttings, the extract?
Just as soon as you have, I guess it depends on when you have that pressure. Ideally, we would like to see some leaves back on the plant. But looking at when you have that pressure and when you need to get that benefit as well.
Okay. Francis wants to know, what are the microbial levels you're finding to be the critical minimum?
I would say that's a context question, that not all soil can even support the same microbial levels. And my bigger thing is, we want diversity and feed that diversity, but microbial levels that's why the soil testing, it's important, but the context of it and how is everything really working and how is everything cycling. And sometimes a lot of these tests, what we test and what we measure gets manipulated. And part of it, we need to look at it from a bigger perspective. And my biggest aspect, I loved watching insects, because the insects and the birds, because they tell us a lot about what's going on within our microbial levels.
So Ryan wants to know if you could describe more about the algae added in the composting process.
So, we start adding algae. It gets added right after our fish pond, and we have a floating worm bed, and that floating worm bed always has something growing on it, and so we're spraying algae on top of what's growing into that. We're also adding some algae in that water too, and then from there, it's getting sprayed onto our entire vermiculture system. So whether it has a cover crop on it or not, it's getting added, and then it's getting added through our extract process as well.
And also, and then Ryan asked, could you describe more about how you scaled up the Johnson-Su method? I'm still using the pallet-sized method, falling behind, it seems.
I kind of took an approach that if we build it, they will come. Feels a lot crazier today than it did years ago now, but just we hauled in thousands of truckloads worth of manure and other substrates, and really fine tuning our process to create the breathability level that we wanted throughout our system. I find some of the practices within the Johnson-Su methods to be, at least they don't work for us. They may work for others, but maintaining breathability on your system is really important to me. And so we like having chunkier items at times in order to help create that breathability. And what we do with the biochar, and my big thing is, how are you going to keep moisture to it, and how is that system going to continue to breathe?
Okay, we got a question from Edwin. He wants to know if any of these products are being utilized in Africa. If so, where? And the algae is, so Mayor can talk about that.
We have not shipped worms or any of our substrates to Africa, but we're definitely not opposed to that. But we haven't done it to date. But one thing that, our worm side of the business, we sell very few worms on the retail basis. It's on our website, but most of our worms go to larger operations. And within that, a lot of those worms get put onto airplanes and flown. And so, and we'll fly worms to international locations and go through customs and the permitting and process. And that for us, it started as a risk avoidance. During COVID, shipping large amounts of worms ended up being very high risk for us. And if UPS delayed a truck by a day, we may have a total loss. And we had 1 month where we had $60,000 worth of worms end up sitting in trucks and on hot days and getting killed. And so as we started taking larger orders from international customers in Puerto Rico, we started flying. And so we've got processes that we use in order to fly worms to most destinations.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Hi, good to see you.
Same here.
And maybe we can be doing those things together. It is very tricky to ship live biology across continents. And I'll answer, I think it was Edwin's question. We are actually in several pilot programs in Africa and Kenya, Libya, and starting in Zimbabwe and Congo. And we're seeing success there. There's great need for the kind of work that that we're doing and that Dan's doing. There's lots of countries that are they've been restricted access to fertilizers. 40 to 60% of the growers in some of these regions don't even have access to the fertility that they were using before. So it's really important that we make this accessible. So in our plan, we don't want to be shipping live biology all over the world. We would hope, that we would be able to work with the communities and produce and grow algae in those regions too. Thanks for that question.
Hi, Steve.
Okay, Evan also wants to know, what species of cover crops do you use in your systems?
We'll try about anything. When we're looking for, how does it excite the biology? How does the biology react to it? And when we like things that produce good exudates, but we're also looking at companion cropping. And so looking at, if we know that this row is going to go towards corn, we're looking at companion crops in order to create the enzymes and actually leave that within our casting. So our in-furrow and foliars and granulars are better for whatever crop that our grower wants to produce. So again, it's not a one size fits all for us. Some of those cover crops are relatively cheap for us to do, and others like broccoli are a little bit more expensive. So
Francis wants to know, are you advising users to avoid high pressures when spraying?
Yes, we do. We like to stay around 40 PSI. We've got a few that'll go up to 70, 75, but yeah, we do like to stay low pressure.
Okay. So owner, if this is, I know that's not probably your name, could be, but if you want to unmute yourself and tell Dan about this, you can. If not, I can read it. I'll see if you unmute. Okay, I'll read it. So we are in a D2 drought with projection for warm and dry fall and winter. Northwest Oklahoma, sandy soils. We will be no-till drilling in triticale, oats, brassicas, and legume mixtures this fall. We do not have the current ability to do in-furrow application. We do not have the current ability to do in-furrow apply liquid. We would like to treat the seed and put a granular in furrow. What would be the in-furrow application rate, and how does this change the starter fertilizer required? Oh, sorry. He said we would like to put a granular Fed and Happy product in furrow at planting for clarification. And then what would the rate be, and how does this change the starter fertilizer required?
So typically from a starter fertilizer, we're usually 100% replacement. Now we want to look at the soil test and talk to you a little bit about, make sure that is appropriate. And especially, I find that looking at that mix, especially during a drought, is just a little bit more important. because our mobilization of nutrients when it's dry does get a little bit harder at times. And so looking at especially how we tiller, we want to take all that into account. On our application rate, typically we're 10% of the seeding rate per acre. So if you're 70 pounds, we're going to be about 7 pounds worth of our drill mix, and that's mixed with the seed. And the big key to that is just not over mixing. That we want to have about 2 touches, but we want to keep it simple. Whether that go through a seed tender, the one thing that we do want to avoid is just taking, typically if we see a plug issue, it's because somebody took just a 40-pound bag or a 50-pound bag and kind of dumped it in, maybe mixed it a little bit, but they really didn't mix it. And so they can get a plug there. So looking for that consistency, but it doesn't have to be crazy mixed with a high speed or a double blender or anything like that either. So, and you can do that as a hybrid, and we've got some videos as well. You can do that as a hybrid of the liquid seed treat to start, and then do the granular later as well.
All right, well, that is it for the questions in the chat. If anyone has any more questions, unmute. If not, we can just hang out for a few minutes. But thank you everyone for your questions and for joining us. Oh, Rick's got a
Thank you.
question. And thanks, Dan. But yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, so for someone who's starting, and we have a new farm, we're trying to rehabilitate the soil. It's primarily clay. What are some best practices that you might recommend for like a small farm to get started in improving the soil health, the biodiversity? We've read a little bit about like horticulture and vermiculture and hugelculture, but just wondered if you might be able to share some advice.
So just getting started, that looking for your low cost options to get started, and not overthinking it. And oftentimes, a 2,000-pound bag, it's going to go a lot farther than just a 40-pound bag, and that cost difference usually isn't significant. And if it's a smaller deal, look for ways that you can overutilize, whether that be a casting or mix it in with another substrate that you have. But then also look at areas where you might see some water puddling, or you may see an area that does a little bit better. Build from your strengths. Get biology going there, and then knowing that, as those areas, as you get some rain, that biology is going to help get pushed the other parts as you have some runoff. So look for ways that you can work with nature instead of against it. And if work with living roots. So, if you've got trees, or if you've got just areas, just get the castings out there and grow. And then look at other cheap substrates that you can mix with the castings in order to make sure that you have plenty of food for the microbes out there, and that you're not going to burn, but just get it out there and let it turn it into food, let it build more soil. And doing so, it's also going to open things up. And also, especially if you are tight, having areas where you may core, you may aerate here and there, but looking at other options to make sure that you're getting biology deeper in the soil too. So,
Thanks.
but again, keep it simple,
Okay.
keep
Yeah,
it fun.
thank you. Yeah, we have land that
Yep.
used to be a farm and hasn't some time, and now we're trying to bring that back. So it was good advice. Thank you.
And Rick, that's a good, I know we've talked about this, but just for everyone else's knowledge, that's a good opportunity for a stacked solution to use Dan's compost or a vermicompost along with live algae or other biostimulants. Those will work really well together for that regenerative benefit for your soil. And if anyone else is in a similar situation as Rick, we would love to chat with you about how to stack those solutions and things that work really well together.
Yeah. Okay, and then Kyle, and yeah, also if it becomes 8 o'clock, thank you everyone. We don't want to hold you, but we have a few more questions. So Dan, if you're okay to stay on a few extra minutes, you can answer them. So Kyle wants to know, would it be beneficial to add the extract to fall planted cover crops to kickstart the system, planning for next year's cash crop? Would a feed mixer be a good way to mix the product and seed, to mix a granular and seed for clarification?
Absolutely on both. And yes, on the feed mixer, it works well. The key is, running at a fairly low speed. You want good consistency. You just don't want it to beat it to death. Especially with our seed mix drill that, we like to keep that strength to it. So it doesn't need to be super overmixed by any means. And as far as, kickstarting that biology, yes, it's the living root. You're going to kickstart it, but I'm not going to say that's going to eliminate anything that you want to do on that cash crop, but it is going to help you, one, produce more carbon, produce more biomass, put more carbon in the soil, and just and most likely you're going to be retaining more moisture as well. So
Thanks, Kyle. Riley wants to know, at what percentage of solution are you adding N soil to extract? Example, X number of ounces of N soil added to X gallons of extract.
That is variable depending on our growers' application time. Pretty variable rate depending on what's going on. And it really does depend. Typically, it is less than the in-soil recommended rates.
Yeah, we recommend 8 ounces in an acre, by the way. I don't know how that translates with the extract, but it's a pretty small amount. And Larry wants to know, do castings need to be incorporated?
Yes and no. A lot of our castings on, say, a turf basis or a grazing basis will get spread right on the surface and then get watered in, or if we've got some moisture on the surface, they'll hit that surface and then start working in there. Anytime you can incorporate them in is better, but it also depends on what are you going to do to the soil structure. What are the pros and cons of doing that too?
Awesome. Well, it's right at 8:01. So thank you so much, Dan. This was great. And everyone will get this recording tomorrow in a follow-up with a bunch of other information about how you can learn more and get yourself some extracts as well. So yeah, thank you guys. We hope to stay in touch. We really appreciate everyone coming tonight and for all the great questions. And Rich, just thanks for bringing your bird, because really cute.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank
Bye,
you so much,
guys.
Dan.